Welcome to this insightful episode of Thursday Discussion Series brought to you by Clean Tech Podcast. My name is Jesse Guda, and I'm your host. This podcast is brought to you by Clean Technology Hub in partnership with Tech Talk Africa as we continue to explore innovative solutions shaping Africa's clean energy future. Today's discussion is centered on the theme empowering African communities through clean energy solutions. We'll be focusing on how community-based renewable energy projects are transforming rural areas, providing much needed electrification and driving economic development across Africa. And so our objective is in threefold today: to understand the current state of rural electrification in Nigeria and the broader African context, to explore the transformative impact of clean energy solutions on livelihoods, creating new economic opportunities, and to identify the challenges, opportunities, and strategies for scaling these solutions to benefit more communities across the continent. And so by the end of this conversation, we hope to inspire actionable insights for policymakers, private stakeholders, and community working groups towards a cleaner, brighter, and more equitable energy future in Africa. And so today we're honored to have a distinguished guest with us, Mr. Abba Abubakar Aliyu. He is the Managing Director of the Rural Electrification Agency of Nigeria. Mr. Abba has been at the forefront of advancing energy access across rural and underserved communities in Nigeria. And we're so excited to dive into this conversation with him. Thank you, Mr. Abba, for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from your wealth of experience, sir.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, sir. So if you're ready, then let's begin. As the Managing Director of the Rural Electrification Agency, and again, I must actually say a heartfelt congratulations on your very recent appointment as the substantive MD, CEO of the REA. This is a testament of your hard work, your dedication, and a lot of the successes that the REA has been able to record in recent times, in the last 1 year. Please, can you share with us some of the latest developments in the Nigerian Rural Electrification Agency efforts to bring about rural electrification in Nigeria? What are some of the milestones that the agency has achieved in recent times?
Thank you very much once again. I will start by just highlighting once more the mandate of Rural Electrification Agency. Our mandate is as simple as creating electricity access for the unserved communities in Nigeria. This includes catalyzing socio-economic activities. So we go beyond just illuminating the communities, but making sure that there is productive use of this electricity where we create this access. The second prong of our mandate is now creating reliability for underserved areas. So there are areas that they have this access, but the reliability of the access, it's not qualitative. So we are required to now intervene in such areas and create more reliability. And within that context of this mandate, we intervene in 3 specific key sectors of the Nigerian economy, specifically the health sector, education sector, and the agricultural sector. So these are the key areas. Now, to answer your question in terms of what are the key achievements Rural Electrification Agency recorded recently, the first, it's creating a clear path of electrifying the underserved and unserved communities. We identified where are these communities, what is their nature, how many are they, what are the socio-economic indicators around these communities, what is the best means, what we call the least cost of providing them with this electricity. Why this is important is when you are tasked with providing electricity with huge number of people, which we estimate both unserved and underserved to be around 80 million Nigerians, you need a good data for you to channel your effort in a very efficient manner. And that is why it becomes necessary for us to have this data. So we have completed the geospatial mapping of the country. We have identified the socioeconomic indicators within these communities. And we have also identified the least cost of providing them with this electrification. The second aspect of it, it's when you now have the numbers and the data and the mandate, you require the resources that you needed to be able to undertake this activity. And that is why we embarked on sourcing this funding. And through this, our intervention, we have secured different fundings. We have secured the $750 million from World Bank, which we intend to use to crystallize 1.1 billion private sector funding and channel that entire 1 billion 850 million to electrify 17.5 million Nigerians. We are also, I just visited Japan, where we had a session with JICA, Japanese International Cooperation Agency, where we are at a very advanced stage of crystallizing additional co-financing required under the DES program, that is the distributed access through renewable energy scale-up, the $750 million project I just spoke about. To add additional about 4 million additional Nigerians to be provided. So we are at an advanced stage of securing that funding. We are also at a very advanced stage in our discussion with the African Development Bank for additional funding of 700 million that we will use to also electrify additional 10 million Nigerians with significant also intervention in education and agriculture. So these are huge achievements because whatever the nature of your plant, whatever you design, if you do not have the resources that you needed to be able to implement the plans, you will end up without achieving nothing. So we have done that. Then also from the national budget perspective, the federal government has seen, have very confidence in the management of the Rural Electrification Agency. And if you check the budget, you will see that a lot of funding has been provided to rural electrification, the biggest funding ever in the history of the agency. We have gotten over almost $500 billion naira for us to intervene in agriculture, to intervene also in the solarization of public institutions with a view to reduce the governance costs of the country. And we are also intervene to extend the grid in various parts of the country. So all these resources are there. The third aspect of our achievement is the completion of the National Electrification Project, which was started the last 5 years, and we're able to come and accelerate it and expend the money by catalyzing the private sector, where we electrify over 8 million Nigerians. and connected over 1.5 million households and deployed over 1 million solar home system and deployed over 200 mini grids across the country. This is a huge achievement. And through the project also, we have completed our intervention in 7 universities, federal universities, where we deployed a hybrid mini grid in these universities, which we are about to commission. We also deployed a number of productive use of equipment under the African Development Bank component, and we started intervention in 8 universities and 1 teaching hospitals, which we will start commissioning by the end of the first quarter of this year. If you check my Twitter, you will see a lot of updates being provided in the aspect of the energizing education and the productive views. We give almost periodic updates for the general public to see what we are doing. So this is also another huge achievement that we have recorded. We also commenced the Africa Mini Grid project. We just signed 23 agreements with 18 private sector to deploy mini grids in agricultural hubs that we identified through a different project that is called Energizing Agriculture Program, where we map these agricultural clusters, either an area that has one anchor load agricultural processing unit or an aggregate of different agri service providers. So we signed that agreement and we have commenced the deployment of this our intervention. It is our expectation that by the end of this year, we'll be able to complete this mini grids. We also have commenced work commissioning of the accelerated interconnected mini grid, the IMAS, which is funded by European Union. In fact, yesterday we commissioned one. We're going to commission additional number of them, 17 of them, in very near future. We have all completed these interconnected mini grids and we are deploying them very well. Lastly, these are not, I can just keep talking about the achievement.
Keep going on and on. Yeah. There's a lot to,
yes, to just summarize. So lastly is the designing of also another landmark project in partnership with the subnational that we call EHAT, Energizing Health, Education, Agriculture, Rural Communities, and Transportation via e-mobility. What we have seen is the best way of intervening into communities in the most economically efficient manner. So what we have seen previously being done is getting into community, intervening in just health sector, or just intervening in the education, or just intervening in the rural communities. So we now design to reduce our cost of project development. We intervene into these communities and deploy an integrated solution that will address the health challenge, the education sector challenge, the agricultural sector challenge, the rural community challenge, and the economic activities challenge being faced by this community. This project has been launched. We have created the steering committee. We have seen a lot of traction from different states. We are starting with 10 states as a pioneer project, which would commence very soon. So I would also just mention the state-by-state roundtable, engaging with the subnational to engage them under our state matching program, the designing of the National Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan. All these key development that are very critical in the sector, including the designing of the renewable energy service company RESCO model, which we really want to leverage on to ensure sustainability of all our intervention across the country. So this is bit of it, but if you want more, I can continue.
Yes, as we go on in the course of the program, yes, we would dive into other aspects. But this is, I would say, this is a wonderful milestone, that the REA is achieving. You mentioned empowering, the communities, not just through, the production of electrification or the provision of electricity alone, but also the economic aspect of it, empowering them to own, this process. That is excellently put. I think in 2023, the Electricity Act was signed into law, and it authorized the state governments to generate their own power supply, if I'm not mistaken, within their own jurisdictions. And so invariably that took the management of power out of the exclusive list and domiciled it now in the concurrent list for states to participate. And so how is the REA aligning its mandate with this policy shift, therefore, saying that states can now develop policies in that regard and implement?
A very good question. We have really analyzed the Electrification Act. To us, it's one of the landmark achievement of the present government of President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, on the basis that it is one single document that deepen open the entire sector for different players to now come into, which we expect to catalyze more private sector funding, more collaboration with the subnationals. Based on our analysis, there are a number of key changes that are important. One, the way you mention it, is the liberalization of the entire sector. Hitherto, the transmission segment of the power sector is just within the purview of the federal government, but now it's been open to both subnational and private sector. Two, it's also the opening it to the subnational to participate in the entire value chain. Thirdly, is the reaffirming of the National Electricity Regulatory Commission as the main regulator in a situation where the states are yet to establish the electricity market. And even when the state establishes their electricity market, the regulator will be responsible for regulating interstate activities. Fourthly, is also the reaffirming of Rural Electrification Agency as the main driver of renewable energy. In fact, the Act has made REA to be the custodian of the National Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan, design that plan and be the custodian of that plan. There is also the reaffirmation or the much drive for renewable energy compared to the previous act. This act has talked about more in terms of government, private sector commitment or drive to deploy more renewable energy resources in the provision of electricity. And lastly, there is also a lot of much more emphasis and drive around consumer protection, making sure that consumers get better value of service when it comes to electrification. So these are the key changes that we have seen. Now, the wisdom why the Act mandated the Rural Electrification Agency to design this plan and be the custodian of the plan is, since the Act has opened the sector, has given different stakeholders the opportunity to come into the sector. If there's no coordinated approach in addressing the electricity access challenge now, there's bound to have a situation whereby people may be working in parallel or in counterproductive manner. And that is why the Act now asks REA to develop that plan. And while I was mentioning the achievement of REA, I mentioned that we have started working in that, designing the plan. part of the plan is the entire mapping of the country. This mapping, it's different from all others in the sense that we are doing it bottom up. We're going to different communities, and in each community, we will determine what is the level of electrification within this community. What is how many households and the community, what is the number of people, what is the level of electrification, are they electrified or not electrified, what is the nature of activities, what's the kind of energy that can be provided to electrify all this community, what's the nature of their jobs, so all this data is being created. So as we get this data, we now harmonize it at the local government level. Then we aggregate the local government data to form a state data. So each state will have its own unique data based on its own uniqueness, based on its resources, renewable resources available, based on the number of people that are not electrified, based on the economic nature of that state. And they will now aggregate it to have the national plan that is going to be what it's required. But additionally, we also intend to have sectoral plan, these sectors that we intervene, agriculture, health, and education. We're going to have specific plan for this sector that will be added to the National Electricity Strategy and Implementation Plan. And we are also at the same time going to create a pathway, a roadmap for each state of electrification, which we intend to make sure that each state include that plan in their own state economic development plan. So that is what we are doing. That plan is what we will leverage on to create coordination of electrification between at the federal and the state level, and to make sure that both the subnational and the federal are working in a dedicated manner or using a one roadmap. So in each state, there will be a one plan for electrification, one budget for electrification, one conversation, and one plan. So that is what we are using to make sure that there is a harmonious, coordinated working relationship between the federal and the subnationals.
And this is very interesting and powerful, because in the past, there has been a lot of different roadmaps, to the electrification of the country, which, if you look at it, is not harmonized. And to that extent, it largely leaves it unachieved, Yeah, so I'm sure that with this this pathway that you have just emphasized, I'm sure that more and more communities will, see themselves, electrified very soon. Thank you very much for that, sir. I also had wanted to ask you, because very recently the European Union announced that it was supporting with funding for over 11 mini grid projects. I think I saw that on the news last week or thereabout. And so how does this initiative align with the Irish border strategy? And what, of course, is the impact to our communities? I also saw on the news where a community in Plateau State was there was a launching there of the mini grid project that was done in the community in Plateau State. And so so how does this align with the broader strategy, now that we've talked about the Electricity Act and having a particular strategy that drives these projects?
Yeah, so what you refer to is the IMAS, is what we call the IMAS Interconnected Mini Grid Acceleration Scheme, funded by the European Union and implemented by GIZ and Rural Electrification Agency. In fact, there are 17 interconnected mini grids. The one in Plateau State is just one of the 17. That's a 550 kilowatt electrifying 30,500 households. So these are the the pioneer model of interconnected mini grids that we started, which shows give us the confidence that we can have a mini grid that is connected with the national grid, and at the same time the generation is isolated from the national grid generation system. So that is what we are presently. We have completed all the 17. We would even on the 24th of this month, we are going to commission another one done by our developer that is called Nayo in Niger State, 1 megawatt big mini grid. So these are the ones that we are working. And what we are doing using the interconnected mini grid is using it to create the reliability and at the same time blend the costs of the tariff. Our isolated mini grids has a battery system, and if we are going to find a way to remove the cost of the battery from the cost of deploying the mini grid, it would drastically reduce the tariff. But because they are isolated, there's no any other source of electricity in the communities that we provide them with this isolated mini grid. It means that we have to use the battery storage system to provide them with electricity during the night time when the sun is not shining. But if we find a tripartite agreement whereby we sign with the distribution company to provide this community with electricity in the night from the grid, that would eliminate the need for the battery storage system, and at the same time drastically reduce the cost of the tariff. So this is a model that we are trying, we are testing, and I tell you that in very near future, we see our interconnected mini grids performing not only the function of providing electricity to this community, but for performing some auxiliary service to even the national grid. We want to scale up this deployment of this interconnected mini grids under the DARE program. We want to move from 17 mini grids to 125 of them. In fact, 40 out of the 125 have already, the process of their deployment had already commenced in different states. We have a very good now relationship with the distribution companies. When we requested them to provide us with the sites for us to enhance this reliability, we were expecting some resistance, but to our amazement, they provided us with over 600 sites. And that is quite encouraging, showing the acceptance and the mutually beneficial relationship created between REA and the communities. So this is something that is very important. I think we can manage this.
Yes, we can. It's perfect. All right. So beyond infrastructure development, adequate maintenance of this infrastructure is key for its sustainability. And so, how is REA ensuring that its mini grid projects that it's building in various communities, rural communities in Nigeria, are being protected, away from vandals, away from various people in the society that do not know the importance of these. How is, especially in those underserved and remote communities, how is REA making sure that these facilities are protected?
So very good question. We have a different approach depending on the category of the companies or the category of the infrastructure we deployed. For rural communities, the first line of sustainability one is building our intervention around the private sector and not making it government-only funding. So what I mean here is in all this infrastructure, our key role is de-risking the sector by providing capital subsidy to incentivize the private sector to deploy this infrastructure using our design and specification. So that is it. So in all these interventions, the private sector, they have their own funding, which means that by having a skin in the game, they have to make sure that the infrastructure is working over a period of time for them to be able to recoup their investment, pay off their debt, pay interest on the capital they source and put in the business, in the deployment of the infrastructure, and at the same time make some marginal profit. So that is the first. The second also, it's through our community engagement, social intervention in all these areas, we create what we call the Renewable Energy User Cooperative Association or cooperative group, where we get the community to form a group that will be responsible for owning the infrastructure and serving as the main pressure group that will ensure that the infrastructure is working, protection of the infrastructure, and at the same time protecting the customer and serving as a way of communicating with REA in the event of either exploitation or lack of service by the private sector. So we do that also as a means to do that. Then there is also the level that is often invisible, which is key to our sustainability. And these are things to do with social, environmental. We make sure that even before we approve the deployment of the infrastructure, there has to be a certificate of occupancy. There has to be community engagement. There has to be consensus on the tariff. These are things that oftentimes feel that some people may feel it's just academic exercise, but to us, it's very important. It's part of the sustainability. It's part of the thing that will ensure that the mini grid works over a period of time. So for the PPP arrangement, those are the key things. One, the social, environmental. Two, the PPP framework with the private sector. And three, also the commercial framework that we design. But for our sectoral intervention, these are the kind of project we do at the university level or at the health centers or agricultural clusters. For this kind of project, we are working on creating an asset holding company that would be the owner of this asset and at the same time be the one that would engage a private sector on an O&M basis to run the asset over a period of time, charging the tariff, optimizing the asset, and over time, once the lifespan of the some of the equipment reaches, they will be able to have provisional funds to replace the asset. So this is something that we are doing in the sectoral intervention. So these are the key sustainability framework that we are implementing.
This is instructive, very powerful. So is REA facing any regulatory challenges then?
Yeah, so under my leadership, if there's any regulatory policy challenge, we engage with the relevant stakeholders and get it sorted out. And typical when we came, we've realized that the 1 megawatt cap of the mini grid regulation is not incentivizing as much investment as we will want into the sector. And we engaged the regulator. At the first instance, the regulator flatly said, no, they are not going to increase the cap. They have other regulation like the franchise or embedded generation. We can make use of it. But we further engage them to show them that the mini-grid regulation has already shown how it's able to catalyze private sector investment. In fact, other African countries wants to copy exactly what the regulator has done. So we don't want to deviate from that good work they have done. What we want is for the regulator to look at other African countries that do not have as much as our challenge, but their mini-grid regulations have a cap of some of them up to 100, some 50. So we want them to see it from that wisdom. We did like different back and forth, like exchange about 8 different letters between REA and the regulator. And I'm happy to say that the regulator now is working towards creating an interconnected mini-grid regulation that will increase the cap. And this is really kudos to the regulator. And it's also to show our tenacity and our belief that if there's a challenge or there's a policy bottleneck or regulatory bottleneck, what is required is to do a constructive engagement with this policy makers or regulation makers, and you are bound to convince them. And I'm happy that it's under my leadership that we have convinced the regulator to the extent now that they are working towards creating this regulation, which would definitely incentivize. So absolutely, once we see any bottleneck regulation-wise, policy-wise, we engage the relevant parties. The minister is always always listening ears, always ready to respond to our requests. If there's any policy issue, it's just a matter of writing to the minister, convincing him, showing him the economic viability of the change, and absolutely he would make a policy pronouncement.
Interesting. Let's look long term now. Let's look ahead what REA is doing now. Are there any strategic priorities that REA is mainstreaming or looking at for the next 5 years, given that the sector is expanding, and our communities are in recent times, seeing lots of light and electricity power in their sphere. What is REA's plan for the next 5 years to further consolidate on its present achievements?
Very good question. I want to tell you that in the next 5 years, what we are looking at is making Nigeria to be the renewable hub of the entire Africa. We, REA, under my leadership, we want to turn the 85 million people that have been seen as maybe as a challenge or as a problem, want to turn it into opportunity. We want to leverage on that unique opportunity of providing people as much as the population of Turkey with electricity into making Nigeria to be the renewable hub of the Africa. So that is the first. And we want to achieve that, one, by catalyzing local content value chain manufacturing in country, which already had started. We have now about 500 megawatt photovoltaic technology assembly plant in the country. That 500 is already in country. 250 by a company called JRV, 100 megawatt by a company called Navin in Lagos, and another 100 megawatt by another company, Oxano in Lagos. So that is something that is already there. But beyond that, this will not make us to be the hub of renewable in Africa. But we are also strategically discussing a number of strategic intervention. We are working with InfraCo, MOFI, and REA to catalyze a 1 gigawatt, that is 1,000 megawatt photovoltaic manufacturing plant in Nigeria. Very soon, you will see a big announcement around that. Already work is undergoing. We are also working with Owando for another 1 gigawatt. This one, it's under the Owando initiative. REA is not part of the owners, but we are de-risking that initiative by providing a ready-made market for the Owando to be able to have the comfort and make that investment. So that is it. Then at the same time, REA has working with Naseni. We are catalyzing another investment for lithium battery assembly plant in the first phase. And in the second phase would be a complete lithium battery manufacturing plant in Lekki Trade Free Zone in Lagos. And this has already started. The company is called Green Vault. The process of creating that assembly plant had already gone started. So this is something also that we are looking at having. Then we'll continue to leverage on this market that we are creating to catalyze more investment into the sector, to the inverters and so on. And in April or May, we are going to have an international manufacturing summit in Nigeria, focusing on companies that are already producing or manufacturing or assembling or planning to start assembling of renewable energy equipment in Nigeria. And that is something that is very soon we are going to send out the notice. And that is our own way of defining the strategy to make Nigeria to be the renewable hub of Africa. Then we are also working on catalyzing a 1 trillion naira company that we call it REMCO, Renewable Energy Asset Management Company. This is also in collaboration with Ministry of Finance Incorporated and Infraco. This company would be the catalyst, the financial catalyst of catalyzing investment in both the manufacturing and the private sector investment. Already the process is there and would be the owner. I mentioned to you that for big intervention at the university level, we are looking at having a company that will own that asset. So this company will own this asset, create a big balance sheet, and optimize the asset by leveraging on that balance sheet to create more funding that will be used to continue to deploy either investment in manufacturing or investment in sustainability or investment in research or investment in addressing the access challenge. It's going to be a huge intervention also in the country. Lastly, I'm looking at seeing our rescues becoming a source of foreign earners for the country, intervening not only in Nigeria, but going the entire rest of the Africa. We have seen many times when we go to this regional event, the recent one in Tanzania that Mr. President was there, where the Minister of Power presented the Nigeria Electricity Compact. We have seen how they get amazed with the level of achievement that we have recorded, and they always want to learn from us to see how they can achieve as much as we have achieved. So we want to leverage on that to get our renewable energy service company to become international, go to this country, start intervening, deploying the experience, and be able to earn some foreign income for themselves and bring it back to the country. as a means to get Nigeria, enhance the Nigerian GDP. So this is something that we are also looking at. Lastly, we are looking at in the near future to facilitate the creation of renewable energy university in Nigeria. It's going to be the first renewable energy learning center in the entire Africa. Would be specially focusing on green energy, green intervention, green courses, research in that area. There's going to be a private sector in DFI inter collaboration to catalyze that. Initial work on the concept note had already started, and we want to see that in the next 2-3 years, we make that into reality. So in a nutshell, these are things that we intend to see in the next 5 years.
Wow, that is the whole lot. And it's a step in the right direction. I mean, because it now tells us that there's hope, for the renewable energy sector in Nigeria. More importantly, to land on your last point where you talked about the establishment of the renewable energy university. It's a semblance of hope for young people in Nigeria, who will look up to the development of skills and all that within that sector. And so there you have it, our viewers. You've listened and you've heard from Mr. Abba Aliyu, who is the MD, CEO of the Rural Electrification Agency. We want to thank you very much, Mr. Abba, for being on this call and for shedding more light on clean energy growth in Africa, and also how the RE is empowering African communities to develop in the sector. We look forward to having you back in Nigeria in the coming days. Until then, thank you and enjoy your stay in Japan.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you.
Thank you.